What if I told you there's a better way to care for aging adults, one that reduces isolation, keeps them healthier, and costs less than traditional home care? Today's guest has spent decades proving that senior care doesn't have to be lonely or unaffordable. Let's dive in.
Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR Growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights. And with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
Welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast that dives deep into the senior living and senior care industries, bringing you insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront of marketing and sales. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. For those of you who don't know about us, CCR Growth is a full-service marketing and growth agency exclusive to the senior living industry. At our core, we help providers achieve three things. Number one, we deliver higher qualified leads that convert to tours and move-ins in less time. Two, we help reduce or remove the reliance on paid referrals, significantly reducing your cost per move-in. And three, we measure, optimize, align, and integrate all of your marketing and sales systems to track crucial data such as acquisition costs or the length of your sales cycle, helping your communities make more informed decisions that positively impact growth, sustainability, and profitability. Through this podcast, I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of the senior living industry, helping communities connect with the families and residents they serve in more meaningful and effective ways that impact your bottom line. Today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Merle Griff, founder and CEO of CCR Senior Solutions. Dr. Griff is one of the leading authorities on elder care in the United States. She's served on multiple national boards and advisory committees focused on aging, developed groundbreaking intergenerational programs, and written extensively on caregiving and family dynamics. Dr. Merle's approach challenges the traditional nursing home versus home care debate by advocating for a third option, adult day health centers. Her work has proven that seniors thrive in socially engaging environments, and she's on a mission to change the way we think about aging. So in this episode, we're going to discuss how intergenerational programs are changing the lives of both seniors and young people, why adult day health centers are an underutilized but powerful solution for families, and the biggest trends shaping the future of senior care. So, Dr. Merle, welcome to the show. We are so excited to learn from your expertise.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jerry. I really appreciate this opportunity. Your show is very successful and very well received and will help us in our mission of letting people know there are multiple options for care. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. And I do believe that. I think that everybody kind of sees senior living or senior care as a one-dimensional entity sometimes. And I think there's so many more components to it, other than just my parents are in this place and, they're not able to function in their home. So we need to get them into a senior living community. It's not that simple. There's so many other options along the way as people progress through different stages of their life. And I think that this is such a wonderful example of how we can approach this challenge, especially with the growing population of older adults. We need to figure out how we can help as many people as possible. So, Dr. Merle, I always like starting with the journey. Your career began in child psychology, and then you later transitioned to elder care. What led to that shift, and how did CCR Care come to life?
I was doing graduate work in the city of Pittsburgh and working with Dr. Sally Newman, who was really a pioneer in intergenerational programs. I was then in Ohio developing techniques to include grandparents in play therapy sessions. So I was already working my way there when I had an opportunity to consult to what they called a multi-use geriatric project that had a child daycare center in it. They actually literally had a space across from the child daycare center. They didn't know what to do. And someone said, why don't we do an intergenerational program? Merle, you've been working with Dr. Newman. We could do this child and adult daycare center together. I said, wow, that's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
When I think about it now, you have to be young to take these kinds of risks. Went back to school, got additional training in gerontology, and opened up our first Sarah Care Center, adult day health center, because I wanted to do those intergenerational programs.
And when you started that, what were the most surprising results you saw when you brought older adults and children together like that?
Originally, intergenerational programs started because Dr. Newman found that kids, especially young children, were really afraid of older adults. They were kind of scared by the canes and the wheelchairs and the walkers, and and so they were frightened of them. And so what we found in our intergenerational programs was that once children got to really know the seniors and become familiar with them, they got to know them and they got to love them. We found some surprising things. We found that high school seniors who were doing community service with us, we started to form groups with our seniors, and we began to talk about things like hot topics. And our seniors were more than willing to talk to them about.
That's probably surprising for them.
I know,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one of our seniors saying, look, the only difference between your generation and my generation is you feel the need to talk about it and put it up on a screen, where we did it discreetly. And they were talking about sex at the time. Those were very, very great groups that the high school students loved and our seniors loved. We also ran actual therapy groups. I took seniors from my adult day health center from Sarah Care to a locked day treatment center of adolescents. And I recently was lecturing on that in Croatia, actually, and I showed them pictures of, for example, of a young woman. When you see her coming into the group, she has a feeding tube in, she looks very gaunt. I mean, she had been through multiple day treatment programs and eating disorder clinics, and no one could really be effective with her. She paired herself up with a woman who had had a stroke. Her name was Hilda, and she was in a wheelchair. When you see a picture of this young woman 6 months later, after her work with Hilda, being in the group with Hilda, feeding tube is gone. She looks happy. She looks healthy. It was unbelievable. It was incredible, the work that the seniors could do with these kids that as therapists, actually, many of us could not do. And I ran into Hilda's daughter when Hilda was coming to the end of her life. She had had another stroke and was at that point in a nursing home. And I said to her, I really want to thank you. Your mother made such a difference in this young woman's life. It was incredible what she did. And she said to me, actually, I want to thank you because that young woman gave meaning to my mother at the end of her life. So it was reciprocal.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What would group work look like between intergenerations like that?
Well, they're usually, in order to be very effective, they need to be structured. So even when we were dealing with the preschoolers and our seniors, we found that it was better when those things were structured. Just bringing kids into a day center or an assisted living or whatever, and, they come and sing their songs, or, they parade around in their Halloween costumes, whatever, is really not effective intergenerational programs. Intergenerational programs really need to form relationships between the seniors and the children. So we had programs like Rock-A-Babies, where our seniors who were physically able went into the infant daycare center and rocked them. It's surprising to me, most of the people who participated in that were men, not women. That was not what we anticipated.
That's interesting.
The men told us that in their generation and at their time, they were busy working, often 2 jobs or very long hours, and really didn't have time to spend time with their babies and their toddlers and their young children. And they loved it. They would go every day to rock the babies, which
That's
was
so
an
cool.
amazing experience. We found that our dementia seniors did well with toddlers. The toddlers loved our dementia seniors because they told them the same thing over and over and over again, where for the rest of us that may have been a little tense and perhaps even a little annoying at times, the toddlers loved it, and they would say, "Oh, I love Grandma Betty," because she'll always tell me that story. I love her.
Yeah. Wow, that's so
So
sweet.
there were many. I will just tell you one quick thing. I ran into one of the kids we had at our intergenerational programs when she had moved out of the daycare center and was now in first grade. And I said to her, "Hey, hi, how you doing? Great. How do you like your new school?" She's like, "Well, it's okay." And I said, "Why? What's the problem?" And she said, "Oh, there's no grandmas and grandpas in this
Oh,
school."
that's so sweet.
Yeah.
That's awesome. There's a lot of people who don't know that adult day healthcare centers even exist. Can you explain or talk more about what they are and how they differ from home care and assisted living?
Sure. So people come to us during the day and then they go home at night. And that's really the big difference. We say 101 activities and home by dinner. So they're not living with us. They do go home.
Mhm.
They can continue to stay with their families, but it gets them out of their house, which is a big differentiator from home care. Because when you're in a hospital or you have to stay home for a period of time, you get disoriented. You lose track of what day it is. You lose track of what's going on. You don't give as much attention to your appearance or how you're speaking. Getting people out of their homes and with other people and having them have friends and socialize is a big factor. The other big factor in adult day is we're staffed with RNs and LPNs. So we can do a pretty high level of healthcare while they're with us during the day. And it gives real respite to the family caregiver. Most of us, when we have someone in our homes, we're not laying down to take a nap, or we're not resting, or we're not
Yeah,
doing,
that's
or
true.
sitting down and read a book because you feel uncomfortable because someone's in your home, right?
Hmm.
And the other thing is when your family member knows you're in the house, they usually want you, even though there's a caregiver there. So this way, having them leave the home is better for them, better health care, better socially for them. And then the family caregiver can either go to work if that's what they need to do, or they can get real respite for themselves.
I think that's huge. I think the social isolation piece is enormous too. One of the statistics I read last year was saying something along the lines of at the age of 65, we spend up to 6 hours a day alone. And by the age of 80, it's up to 10 hours a day alone.
Mhm.
So that's a huge, huge difference, at a time in life when our social circle is shrinking. I think we need to find these types of opportunities as much as possible. So that's great.
Yeah.
Um, I think many families also assume that their only options are home care or nursing home. So what are the biggest myths about adult day health centers that need to be debunked?
I think the fact that we're babysitters um,
Yeah.
is a big thing. They equate day health, and we try not to use the term adult daycare because it gets, thought about like child daycare, and it's not. Um, and so I think people think that it's babysitting, and it's not babysitting. We have professionals who are working in the centers. People often come into us on 14 medications, and they're confused. Our nurses are addressing those issues. Uh, we have roll-in showers so we can do bathing. It is not, it is far from babysitting. I think the other thing is because it's during the day, they think it's going to be more expensive.
Hmm.
There's no funding for it. It's actually less expensive than 4 hours of home care. You could really get care for an entire day for less than 4 hours of home care. And Medicaid does pay for it. So does VA, it's a benefit of veterans funding plus private pay and long-term care insurance.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that was going to be my next question because I would assume that most people would think it was more expensive than home care. And obviously, uh, a nursing home would be very expensive because that's round the clock care. So that's great to know that that's an option for people. I know we kind of talked about one example of how the adult day centers can reduce isolation, prevent cognitive decline, and even improve physical health. Is there another real life example of someone who benefited from these programs?
I was thinking about this and it made me think of one we'll call Ida.
Okay.
She came to us. She was very confused. She looked very confused. The family was really thinking about placing her. This was kind of their last ditch effort before they placed her in a nursing facility. So she was very confused. She was a full risk. She was a significant full risk. And she was very depressed. So one of the first things that happened is our nurses took a look at her medications. And as I said before, people often come to us literally on somewhere between 12 to 14 medications, plus an over-the-counter that they're taking. Wow. That's really contraindicated. So the first thing our nurses did with our consulting pharmacists is to call all of these physicians, make them aware of all of these medications, because seniors don't always disclose to their physician everything they're taking. And that we got her medications down. I think she went from 13 medications a day to 3 medications a day.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
At one time, she was no longer confused. And the family was like, oh my gosh, you work miracles. We're like, no, we just got her medications in order, right? She was with us. She became a very active member of one of our community service groups, which we do in every center. That particular year, we were working with Wishes Can Happen on fundraising. She became a very, very significant member of that fundraising committee. In fact, she became such an important member of that when they did their radio broadcast, she was invited down to the radio studio to be on the radio broadcast to talk about her fundraising efforts for Wishes Can Happen for a child. So obviously she was no longer depressed. Cognitively, she was doing much better because she was out of her home. She was active. She had to suddenly be aware of her appearance. She suddenly had to be aware of how she was speaking to people. Plus, she participated in our cognitive fitness program, which is called Brain Savers. So she began to do very well, and she was with us for many, many years. And the family was very happy that they did not have to place her, and that she was back with them again.
Wow. What an amazing turnaround. That's great. That's great. So I want to talk about Studio 55. This is a new approach to active aging that you've rolled out. You recently launched Studio 55 for 55 plus communities. How does this program differ from traditional senior living models?
Let me give you an actual case study, an actual example that started us. So we have a couple that was living in an active over 55 community. She is relatively healthy. She's out, she's playing pickleball, she's playing mahjong, cards, bridge, whatever. She's out. Her husband, who is a retired physician, has some issues. Cognitively, he's fine. He's great, all right? But he is a full risk. He has mobility issues, and he has to take his medications on time during the day. So she was hiring someone to come into the home. The person she was hiring was fine. This is not a criticism of that. But he was getting very, very depressed and very angry at the same time at her because she got to get out, she got to leave, she got to do things. He was very isolated. We always get back to that. And cognitively, because he was just fine, he had no one to speak to about things he really wanted to talk about. So he was getting more isolated. So what we did is we took space in the over 55 community room. Those are beautiful spaces. They're very, very underutilized. And we created Studio 55. We have an LPN, a licensed nurse there, plus an activities assistant. And so people like this gentleman can come to us during the day. It doesn't have the term adult day or adult day health on it. That's why we called it Studio 55. He comes to us for, depending on the program, 4 to 5 hours a day. The wife knows that he's safe because our nurse is there and she's overseeing his medications. He's eating properly, and we're designing activity programs to suit them. I mean, in some centers, we have gentlemen who wanted to know more about space and So we have astronauts coming in to talk to them and people from NASA and whatever. I had another group who, for some reason, I can't imagine why, but they wanted to learn more about medicine. And so they watch videos on surgery and heart catheterizations and other types of things. I have women who want to do crafts. And so we have to adapt that for them. But now they're able to do it. Or they want to, whatever they want to do, we're designing for them and we're making sure that they could do those activities. So they're able to get out. They're not isolated anymore. They're with other people who are on the same level mentally and cognitively as they are. And now they're happier and not angry at their spouses anymore because their spouse, so they can stay in their homes for a longer period of time. And now we have, partners that are actually getting along with each other as opposed to fighting with each other.
Yeah. I think it's great too that it's happening in the community so they don't actually even have to go anywhere. I think that's probably
right.
the best part. It's
really designed for 6 to 10 people at a time, so we can use that community room space. We'd like to do more. And it's been a very exciting program for us.
How would that program get rolled out or initiated? Would that be initiated by the community itself, or would the residents be requesting something like that and then somebody would reach out?
It's either way. In one of the communities, one of the residents, found out about the program, and she went to her resident manager, I guess is their name, and requested it. In other situations, the communities are coming to us. They have this empty space. They're concerned about, people selling their homes and leaving to go into other types of facilities. And actually, they want to keep their occupancy. And so in those cases, they're coming to us.
Okay. My next question, you mentioned that seniors in active communities still need some level of care, even if they're not ready for assisted living. How does Studio 55 fill that gap?
Because we have a nurse on duty and we're customizing the programming. And so they don't need to necessarily go to assisted living. We're able to handle medications. We're able to assist them in their personal care while they're with us. And we're able to monitor issues like we can take care of diabetics and insulin. We can do blood pressures on a regular basis. So they can avoid, if they want to, going into assisted living before they're ready to do that.
That's great. So this would be a daily program, I'm assuming?
Yeah, it operates for right now 3 days a week. It really depends on the community and what the needs are.
Well, that's great.
We customize
everything. More about that.
So
yeah. Shifting gears a little bit to talk about dementia and strokes and the changing face of senior care. We've talked before, and you mentioned that you've noticed a significant increase in early onset dementia, strokes, and Parkinson's. What do you believe is driving that trend? Is it health? Is it diet? Is it lifestyle? Is it something in the air? What do you think?
I mean, I'm sure a lot of it has to do with diet and health. I mean, we're obviously hearing a lot these days about the impact of processed foods. I know that my husband was a cardiologist, and he became a vegan, and he took many of his cardiac patients, not all of them, but some of them that had certain types of heart disease, and made them vegetarian or vegan, and ended up taking them off all their heart medications. And there's a lot of research that supports that. I also think we always talk about isolation, but it's a real factor.
That's true. Yeah.
Is a real factor. I mean, technology is wonderful, but honestly, the amount of stress that most of us have by constantly looking at emails and constantly having to respond every evening, every day, I mean, we never get any time off. And it's very, very stressful. And I mean, my husband used to laugh because I used to say things like, we just have way too much communication. And he would be like, Merle, you're a therapist. You can't say things like there's way too much communication. But the fact of the matter is, there's really good communications, that are beneficial and you enjoy. And then there's others that are very, very stressful. So I don't know whether we're just getting early diagnosis and people are more aware and people are coming to us sooner. But I really do think you're right, Jerry, that diet and isolation and stress has just impacted us. I know I hear a lot from people about sleep disturbances and how much that has impacted them. And it seems to be increasing, the amount of sleep disturbance that we're seeing.
Yeah. There was a book that I read called Of Boys and Men by, I think the author's name is Richard Reeves, and it's specifically talking about young boys and young men and how there's kind of this epidemic in this country of them not really being very proactive with pursuing careers and really pushing themselves like their counterparts. Most of the women in this country, like 75% of college graduates today are women, and I thought it was interesting. They said one in three young men are at risk for suicide, which is a pretty crazy statistic. But again, I think that comes down to isolation. I think a lot of boys, they spend a lot of time, in front of screens, and
Right.
I think that carries over. And even people my age, it's kind of addicting. You see a lot of people who can't put their phones down or who are working in front of screens all day long. I think that definitely impacts even just the sedentary lifestyle, just sitting at a computer all day, right? That's got to change things if you're not getting up and moving. And
Right.
I saw that with my grandparents, all my grandparents. Once they retired, they literally sat and watched TV. That's all they did. And all of them ended up with diabetes. Two of them had congestive heart failure. So there were all these other conditions that came up. They all passed in their 80s. So it wasn't like they died at a young age or anything. But still, I think like some of that could have been prevented if they were a little bit more active with their lifestyle.
Yeah, lack of mobility is a very big issue, which is why we try to get people up and moving as much as possible. People, I mean, you're absolutely right. People really do not take into account how important movement is. They think that you have to be doing aerobics, and if you're not doing aerobics, nothing else counts. But that's not true. Walking is very important, and keeping mobile and moving. You're right, is very, very important. When you go into a restaurant the next time, look around and see how many couples or partners or families or whoever are talking to each other, or are they sitting there looking at their phones?
Yeah, we always do that. We always laugh about that.
Yeah. I mean, we've isolated ourselves, I understand. I mean, as a young mother, I would have loved to be able to go to a restaurant and give my child an iPad. I admit that, okay? To have a meal where it was quiet, all right? Or I was not, singing songs or playing games. Right. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So every once in a while, that's fine. But it happens on a regular, basis. And in my home, even with my grandchildren, the rule is no phones at the table. That's it. You got to put them away. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you talk about that in the book too. You mentioned how, your behaviors and actions are going to be mirrored by your children's. If you're sitting at the table with your phone and then you're having a talk with your child about their improper use of screens, no wonder why they're following your examples.
Yeah. I mean, I recently had this actually with one of my own adult children. We were sitting at the table and my granddaughter was talking to him, and I leaned over to him very softly and I said to him, "Put down your phone." All right. Your daughter is speaking to you. You told me your daughter never talks to you. She talks to you, Mom, more than she talks to me. Know why? Put down your phone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely good advice. The average age of a family caregiver too, that's dropped significantly. What does this mean for the future of caregiving, and how can providers better support younger caregivers?
It's interesting. There was a very large study done that showed that the average age of caregivers, family caregivers now, is between 35 and 49. That was really a shock. That was really a surprise. And when they interviewed all of these younger family caregivers, their responses were pretty much the same across the board. One was an impact on their financials issues they had, because things were costing more money than they had anticipated. And so they were very concerned about where they were financially. Some of them have had to either quit their jobs or reduce times in their jobs in order to care for someone. And they were complaining about being very isolated from their own friends, from their own peer groups, because they were busy. One of the things I found, though, across the board, and you talked about this, Jerry, at the beginning of the broadcast, and I really appreciated that, is that people don't know all of their options for care. What we always say to people is, we're going to tell you all the options for care. You may not choose us. That's okay. All right. But we believe very strongly that families need to know about all their options that they have. And very often, especially these younger caregivers, do not know all of their options. And so they put themselves in a situation that they don't necessarily need to be in. One of the interesting things, though, that came out of that was a positive, where some of these younger family caregivers were saying, suddenly having to take care of my parent was scary. There were some things I had to do that I didn't know how to do, but I learned how to do it. And that gave me the confidence to go back into my job and learn new skills and do things that I never would have done if I hadn't had that experience, because I gained confidence in myself and my ability to learn new things. And I found that was very surprising, but very good.
I would agree with that. And I just think there's so many challenges for this, the sandwich generation right now with young kids or younger kids and aging parents and trying to figure out how they're going to provide for both. And Gen X and millennials don't exactly have the same kind of wealth that the baby boomer generation has. So it's a little more challenging, I think, in general, for them to figure it out. So,
and one of the things we talk about to younger family caregivers that have children is, why don't you involve your children in helping to care? And they always kind of look at us and they go, oh, hadn't thought about that. Be like, yes, if you have a 12, 13, 14-year-old, they could have a role and a place in helping to care for a grandparent. And usually it works out pretty well. So families don't always think about all the resources that they really have that they could use.
I think two of the biggest things too, and I know you also talk about this in the book, was the grieving process of caregiving, having to see someone in a different light than you once had, or knowing that the relationship you once had is changing and it's not going to go back to the way it was. That can be difficult. And then even the guilt piece, feeling like you're failing your loved one or you're not doing enough, or is this the right option for them? Am I doing everything I can to make sure they're well taken care of? I think those are really challenging as well.
They are challenging. I mean, I often tell the story of my mother had a very dense stroke. I was living in Ohio at the time. I brought her into my home where she was living in my home. And because she was paralyzed and anyway, she was in a wheelchair. Until I got her strong enough that I could transfer her to the car, she had to go in one of my own CCR vans, my center during the day. And the first morning my van came and took her. I went back into the house just sobbing. And my husband was like, what is going on with you? She's going to your center with your staff. Your office is in the same building. All right. What is the problem here? All right. And I said to him, I realized when I saw my mother go up on the wheelchair lift and into the van that she was never going to be the same. Our relationship was changing, and the mother I knew was never going to be there again. She was aphasic and she couldn't speak. And it hit me at that moment. And that started the mourning process, the grieving for the relationship I had and the person that I knew. Then we ended up with a new type of relationship. And I will tell you that my mother, even though she couldn't speak, could make her feelings heard quite well. All right. Especially about my messy house.
Yeah.
She
could still point.
She could still point. And that finger was unbelievable. It could say a lot. But it is a mourning. It is a grieving process.
Yeah.
People go through.
Absolutely. Switching the gears a little bit to the business of aging and what senior living providers need to know. So I think you're in a unique position and because we have a lot of senior living providers who listen to this show, I think it's important for us to talk about the struggles that they have with occupancy and differentiating themselves. And I feel like better integration with adult day health services could be an answer for them to help figure these challenges out. So how do you think they can better integrate these services into their communities?
In a few of the assisted living centers where we have relationships, it works well as a transitional program. So people come to them, they look, they're like, I'm not quite ready. We're thinking about this, but we're not quite ready. And in that case, Sarah Care and Adult Day Health serves as an intermediary step before they're really ready for the assisted living. And if we're working together, so to say, as partners, then we can reinforce the value of each other's programs. Instead of seeing each other as a threat and taking away business, we see it as a partnership and a way to help each other out. The other situation we've had is when there are partners or spouses, rather than moving, the partner or the spouse who needs more care during the day is coming to us, is coming to a Sarah Care, to an adult day health center during the day. And that helps them to maintain their occupancy rather than having people move out. And that's another way they can do it.
Yeah, that's smart. I mean, that helps them keep the residents they have longer, and they're happier and healthier. So I think everybody wins in that situation.
Right. So for instance, we often have a van. We say, if we need everyone ready by, let's say, 10 o'clock, whatever the time is that's convenient for them, we send a van over to the assisted living. It picks up, 4 or 5 people, brings them to our center for the day, and then returns them at the same time. And so then, people know where they are, they know they're safe, they know they're well cared for, and they can stay in their apartments in the assisted living then.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I know you've worked with providers on shifting from a rigid care model to a more flexible, personalized services. What advice do you have for leaders who are hesitant to embrace that change?
I think the reason they're hesitant to embrace the change is because they've had negative feedback in the past. And because they've had pushback and negativity, they're hesitant to make those changes. I was just in this conversation this morning, and I said to someone, look, it's too much change too quickly, all right? First of all, we need to involve people in the process of the change. We often don't ask people. We don't involve them. So, for instance, we just put in a new software. We evaluated it at a management level first, and then we had key people in key positions evaluate 2 of the softwares we were looking at. The nurses, the direct care staff, the activities staff, they all had input at the very beginning before we actually bought the software and put it in. That's a critical piece. It takes time, all right? And I understand that, but in the end, it's time well spent. To involve people in the process of change. The other thing is to break the change, if you can, down into smaller pieces. So put a small piece in, let people adapt, get used to it. Second piece in, let people adapt and get used to it. We try to do too much at one time, and it's just too much for staff to be handling on top of everything else that they're doing at that time.
I think, too, this generation of older adults is more particular and specific about what they're looking for, or what their expectations are for how the communities are going to help them thrive. Older generations, I think they were happy to just have a room with a bed and a pillow. Sometimes it was that simple. Now we have this higher level of care, higher level of activities and amenities and services that they're going to want to integrate. And it's really important to be able to be flexible. And I think that's one thing the senior living industry struggles with, is change. Everybody has these, I call them dinosaur business models. They've been around forever, and they're afraid to change it because if it's still working, why would we want to change it? Well, it's only going to work for so long, because the way people search for care now has changed. The types of communities they're looking for has changed. Their needs have changed. And if you're not willing to evolve, you're just going to get left behind.
Well, that's how we got to Studio 55.
Yeah.
And that's what I say to providers. I mean, the problem is that we're all very good at what we do. That's true. But the question I have to them is, have you asked anyone? Did you really talk to people? And did you ask them what they really want? And what do they really want to do? And what kind of programs and services do they really want? We have these very expensive assisted livings with huge indoor pools, and they're always empty. It's the same thing with the community rooms. They're always empty. All right.
Mhm.
And they keep building this and spending money on all of this. All right. And my question is, if they're empty, why do we keep building these things? I mean, there must be better uses for these funds and for this square footage. We need to ask people, and then we need to listen. I have a thing with my staff that says WAIT, WAYT, and it stands for why are you talking? Why are you talking? You need to be listening.
Yeah.
And so we don't ask and we don't really listen. I mean, Studio 55 came out of running multiple focus groups and listening to what people really, really wanted and what were the gaps? What were the needs that were not being fulfilled? And then we create programs around that.
That's great. I love that. I love the listening piece too. I mean, I think that's so important is people's feedback. If we're just going to charge ahead with what we think we know people need and not actually listen to what they're asking for, then that's going to be a challenge all of its own. I know we've mentioned the book a couple times, but I just want to mention you've written the book Solace in the Storm, which addresses the challenges of caregiving across all generations. And I love that. Can you tell us about the key takeaways from the book?
I think the key takeaway is communication. And I know we always talk about that, but I end up answering a lot of questions about that. How can I talk to my parents about, increased care that they may need, or taking away the car, or going to see a physician? But it's the same issue with your children. I need to speak to my, adolescent about, schoolwork or his friends or whatever it is. We have things, but we tend to communicate in ways that close doors. Because first of all, we start out with statements that are, get someone's back up, such as, Mom, we need to have this talk. If you ask any senior, about a communication that starts out that way, they already are. They're like, yeah, I know where this is going. Okay.
Yeah.
And they've already got their back up. It's the same thing with a kid. When you say, to a kid, sit down, I want to talk to you, they already know what's coming. Something's up. They're in trouble. Something's going on. So there were some suggestions in the book about how to start having these conversations in a way that opens the door to communication and not close it. And that's really the key across generations, is the issues of open communication, starting conversations in a way that allow people to really talk to you and tell you what they want, and that you listen to what they're really saying. And you try to integrate that into a solution. The second big issue, of course, is self-care. I will tell you that as a parent, as a family caregiver for my mother, and then a family caregiver for my husband, especially when people would say to me, Merle, you have to take care of yourself. I will tell you that I never did this, but there were times I just wanted to slap them. All right. Because my response was to get angry and say, are you kidding me? Come on now. I don't have to take care of myself. I don't have time for this. But as I began to think about it, I realized that taking care of myself, I would interpret, and I think other people often interpret it as taking a day off or taking hours off. And the book talks about things you can do in 5, 10, 15 minutes a day, because sometimes that's all you have. All right. So you don't have an hour to be mindful or to meditate. Just isn't there. Okay. You don't have $500 or $1,000 or whatever to go to the spa for the day. It just isn't there. So you need little ways, and 5, 10, 15 minutes makes a big difference. You can refuel in that amount of time. So it's important to try to grab ways to refuel in short periods of time.
One of the best takeaways for me, I think, was just in general, anyone who's in a caregiving role, and like you were saying, you just want to slap somebody sometimes when they say things to you that are either insensitive or they just don't understand the full scope of like what's going on. The book talks a lot about how to reframe those conversations and how to tell people, what what you're going to accept or willing to accept in your space and what you're not, because often people just don't know. They don't know that they're being insensitive. They just think they're little comments about, the house being messy. If you're the caretaker for your parent or something, they think that's helpful, but they've been there for 5 minutes and you've been there for 2 years taking care of this person. That's pretty infuriating. So I think you do a really great job of articulating that and helping people work through those types of challenges.
Thank you. I guess I should not have said I wanted to slap someone.
No, that is anger is a big piece of that, though. There's a lot on your shoulders when you're in that role. So I've talked to a lot of caretakers, and that frustration piece is huge.
Oh, right. I mean, I speak to a lot of siblings, and they're going to visit their brother or sister who's the primary caregiver, and I say to them, look, when you walk in the house, you haven't been there for 6 months or 8 months or a year or whatever. The first thing you want to do is give them a compliment. You walk in and you feel guilty. So the first thing you say is, oh, mom must be cold. Why isn't she wearing a sweater? Or why is this way? Or why isn't it that way? No, you don't want to do that. You do that, and then you end up in an argument with your sibling or your parent. That's why. Because they're already tired and overwhelmed, and all you've done is walk in and criticize. After you had a 10-day trip to Hawaii, doesn't go up well. Yeah,
they don't need you to swoop in like a superhero.
Right.
Yeah. Dr. Merle, my last question for you is just how can our audience stay connected with you and learn more about Sarah Care and Studio 55?
So everything is on our website, www.sarahcare.com. Solace in the Storm is available on Amazon. Thank you. Yes,
I got it right here.
And you can order it through major bookstores like Barnes & Noble. We also have a website for Solace in the Storm. We're on Instagram and Facebook. Yes. Yeah, okay. and LinkedIn. All those social media sources.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure we put all that in the show notes so everybody can grab a copy and learn more about all the excellent work you're doing in this community. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to extend a huge thank you, Dr. Merle. This has been such a great conversation. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jerry, for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk about these issues. You've been very open about it, and I really do appreciate how open you've been to discussing alternate ways of providing care. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining the show today and sharing your game-changing insights on senior care, intergenerational programs, and the future of aging. Your passion for reshaping the way we think about elder care, it really is truly inspiring. So if you want to stay connected with Dr. Merle and learn about Sarah Care, Senior Solutions, visit sarahcare.com and check out her book, Solace in the Storm. We'll include all those links in the show notes as well as to her social media. As always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the dynamic world of senior living marketing and sales. And also remember that From Leads to Leases isn't just an audio experience, we're also a video podcast. So if you want to see the video versions of our episodes like the one here with Dr. Merle, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube or Spotify channels. So I'm Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. Thank you for joining us on From Leads to Leases. And please feel free to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. I'm truly grateful for your time and attention. Until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you soon. Thanks, Merle.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified, tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.